Coming up on tonight's episode of Faith versus Culture, why Jesus Revolution is taking the box office by storm. That and more coming up next.
To have sex before you marry is a bad idea.
Don't tell me there's no such thing as gun violence.
That just depends on your definition of when life begins.
There are problems of sin and habit that cannot be solved outside the person of our Lord Jesus Christ.
Well, hello and welcome to this episode of Faith versus Culture right here on the CBN News Channel. And really excited about today's topic, Billy, because over at cbnnews.com, we've been talking a lot about Asbury and these revivals at Lee University that have been popping up. And then in the middle of this, Jesus Revolution hits theaters and it does incredibly well at the box office. And it's just been a wonderful thing to see.
It has been, right? You have a movie about the Jesus movement and revival in the 1970s, right? And then you have actual revival going on at the same time. It's clearly a story that God has written, and it's pretty amazing. We've got Kevin Downs with us. He is the producer of Jesus Revolution. Kevin, how's it going today?
Hey, I'm doing good, guys. How you doing?
We're
Great.
good. We're good. You know, I've got to dive right in here because this has been amazing to watch. This film has blown up at the box office and over $30 million, well over $30 million coming in, which really shows the level of intrigue and interest that people have had. What has it been like to sort of experience that as the producer of the film?
Yeah, it's been amazing. I mean, we've been through this before a little bit with I Can Only Imagine. And, when you release a film, you have no idea how the audience is going to react. I mean, we do test screenings and obviously we do a lot of grassroots screenings and those typically go really well. But when you release a movie the size that Lionsgate has been releasing our films, it comes at you really quick. And all you can do is continue to pray and allow God, like literally 2 weeks before the release. I remember telling John, I'm like, dude, I just feel like God hit me in a moment and said, now it's time. You've done your work. Well done. And let me take the film from here. And it was a very interesting moment. I've never had that feeling before. And so I was like, okay, and it was around the time the Asbury revival was kind of starting because that was, what's funny is people think that we had something to do with it. We had nothing to do with it. I can assure you
Conspiracy.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, please, people, we're not that smart. I mean, seriously, we're not. And so when that started, I was just, I was talking with Alex Kendrick and he was blown away. And he's like, man, you guys just like literally just allow God to just take this from you guys. And I felt that peace in my heart. And I was just like, I remember praying like, Lord, just take this film. It is now yours. Whatever happens, happens. And that was 2 weeks before the release. And so, you continue to do interviews and whatnot, and you go into it, and then you see what happens, and just the sheer volume and number of people that have come back to the theater, and we're seeing videos of like revival going on in movie theaters. We're seeing, prayer outbursts of prayer and worship happening outside of the theater or inside the auditorium after the film, and it's just so encouraging because literally that was our heart. Our heart was to be able to make the film and something like this could happen. I mean, we had no idea revival would break out in college campuses. That certainly wasn't a part of our plan, but God had a bigger plan for the film. And, we really felt his presence throughout the making of the film. There was just miracle after miracle of things that shouldn't have happened the way they happened. And God continued to just kind of guide the path of the film and a lot of the creative and it was just a beautiful thing to just be a part of and witness, almost unlike any other film that we've made in our history together with me and John and Andy.
That's great. And Kevin, there's an interesting aspect of this that I'm seeing with the critics and just people who have watched this film. And Christian movies oftentimes just, they'll get dismissed or criticized by, the mainstream reviewers and people because it's overtly Christian, and they kind of feel like it's preaching to the choir. You guys have pulled off a movie here, which essentially is very evangelistic, yet it also has an appeal greater to that, to anybody who just likes movies and likes a good story. How did you guys manage to walk that line?
Yeah, it's a tough line to walk, you know. I mean, first of all, we wanted to go right at it, meaning, you know, it's hard to tell a story about revival without kind of going right at it. And and that starts with the title of the film, Jesus Revolution. Yeah. And, you know, I give a lot of credit to our partners at Lionsgate. I mean, not once did they ask us to change the title. And, you know, and to go with that title was, I think, a very bold move on their part. We had obviously no issue with it. And we're just like, oh, this is the title of this movie. It has to be. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense for it to be anything else. And they were like, yeah, we agree with you. We're like, really? It was just kind of a surprise. And you know, and then you get into the film, and to be able to like have the baptism sequences filmed the way that, you know, that John and Brent shot them, you know, was just something we've never been able to do before. Number one, because our budgets, you know, ever since signing with Lionsgate, our budgets went up, which is great, because has been our goal, is to be able to deliver a quality of product that is equivalent to whether if you go to the theater and you see a non-faith-based film. I mean, you know, we want to be able to allow people, you know, we're entertainers first, right? And so we want to be people to leave the theater going, you know what, not only was that my dollar well spent, but also, man, I feel so fed in that moment, because I learned something that was so new that I had no idea. And that's what we're seeing with Jesus Revolution. I mean, I love going on Facebook, I mean, literally, and social media, and just reading all of the stories. It's every day there's new stories that pop up, that people sharing how either a sibling or a son or a daughter, their lives were just completely changed when they watched the movie and walked out of the movie, and just seeing God work in that way is just so great.
You know, you talked about a couple of things, the feelings you've had about this that were different spiritually, this movie. Also, I know there were real life baptisms going on. You talked about those baptism sequences. It's really fascinating seeing the stories of these people who are extras. They're in the film and they're actually getting baptized. Greg Laurie's in the water baptizing people for real as you're filming this scene. I mean, what do you make of that? What do you think drove that authentic experience for so many people?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, it starts from, you know, how we shot the film. So we shot about 3/4 of it in Alabama, and then the last 10 days we're in Southern California. And so it was important for us that the baptism sequences happened at actual Pirates Cove in Newport Beach, California. And so, which was not an easy thing to pull off. And so we got the city to give us 3 days to be able to shoot all those sequences. And we did it, I think, like during the first week of March a year ago. So it was about a year this time in Southern California, which if it was this year, it would have been like 25 degrees, you know, outside, and the weather was just really cold this year. And so we were wondering how are we going to pull these off? And, you know, so we ordered like 25, 30 wetsuits just to have like actors and featured extras and some of the crew that were going to be out in the water. That was kind of the plan, but we really didn't have an idea for it. And so as we got through Alabama, and then we started to make our way into the California sequence, all of a sudden you know, you're watching the weather every day, and this heat wave starts to descend on Southern California. And as we got into day one at Pirates Cove, it was 95 degrees on the beach. It was unbelievable. It was so hot. And so we threw all those wetsuits away, and you know, the people on the sand, I mean, I didn't even have shoes on. I mean, it was like literally a warm summer day in Southern California, and it's like March 1st. And so I remember Jonathan Rumi, you know, he comes up to me and the first day and kind of has a smile. He goes, I never told you what I did I, when you guys announced that we were going to be shooting in the first week of March, these baptism sequences at Pirates Cove. And I said, no, what'd you do? He goes, I've been praying daily that God would send a heat wave. And he turns and walks away. And I'm like, wait a minute, that was you. So, you know, it's funny. And so anyways, the first shot that we did, so we do a shot And, we had a couple of cameras up on some rocks kind of shooting across Pirates Cove. And you can see about 3 to 5 seconds of this in the movie, and with kind of some rock in the foreground. And then you see baptisms off far in the distance. And, there's like 300 people on the beach, and there's 2 lines of extras that are kind of going out in the water, and Jonathan's out there. And then we had another pastor that had done it, actually during that time period. Is kind of a cool thing. And you couldn't see who it was, but anyway, it was about a 4-minute take, and I'm kind of hiding behind a rock, and I'm noticing that, okay, what are they talking about out there? Because they're supposed to just be kind of pantomiming it out, and it wasn't nothing really planned. And then they're doing some baptisms. I think each of them did about 3 or 4, and then we all cut. And so both Jonathan and Dave, the other actor that was out there, they start walking in, and I remember Jonathan had this big smile on his face, and he goes, "You'll never believe what happened." And I'm like, "What?" And he goes, "I just baptized people for real." And I'm like, "What do you mean you baptized them for real?" And he goes, "Literally, like this woman just asked me, can you like pray me through the sinner's prayer and then baptize me for real as we're doing this?" And then the next person did the same thing, and the next person did the same thing. And I was like, "Are you kidding me right now?" And he goes, "No, literally, it totally happened that way." And he goes, "It's a good thing I had Greg literally walk me through actually how to do this." So it was just an amazing thing. Both of them did it. They were baptizing people for real as we were shooting. And it was just kind of spontaneous in the moment. Then little did we know, off to the side, over in the other part of the cove, real Greg Laurie is baptizing one of the actors, because for real, literally. And because he was like, "Greg, I'm moved by this moment right here and my life. I just need Jesus in my life right now. And will you pray with me that Jesus will come into my heart?" And he did that. And then as they were done with the prayer, he goes, "And will you go baptize me out in the water?" And Greg's like, "Yeah, let's go do it." And so all this is while we're filming, like literally, it was the most, stuff. It was incredible. That whole 3-day experience was something that we've just never been a part of. And you knew God was in the moment. Like, okay, he made the weather be what it was. It wasn't some 30-degree day where we were fighting the elements or whatnot. And then people getting saved and people getting baptized. And we were just literally, we felt like the hands and feet of Jesus, and we were just following his footsteps for whatever he wanted us to do in the moment. It was really great.
Well, that is just phenomenal and great to hear. And we're going to take a quick break here and be back on the other side. This is Faith versus Culture. We'll be back with Kevin Downs, producer from Jesus Revolution. Back in a second. All right, we are back here on this episode of Faith versus Culture. We are talking to producer Kevin Downs, who was, of course, producer on the Jesus Revolution, just having fantastic success right now. And we're just talking through some of the stories, and really encouraging to hear everything that's going on surrounding this film.
Kevin, you've been around this game and entertainment for a long time. I think through the films you've acted in, the films you've produced. How did you get into this space? How did you enter into the faith and family-friendly space?
It feels like about 5 lifetimes ago, literally. When I was 21, so I'm 51 right now, so 30 years ago, moved to LA and actually met David White at a Bible study. And I can remember, him and I, it seems like yesterday, really, him and I sitting out in front of his house. We're 21-year-old kids and kind of looking up at the stars, lamenting why we're not getting enough auditions and this and that, and going, one day, I can remember the conversation, one day studios will be producing our movies, or we'll be producing movies for studios, and they'll release in theaters across the country. And so that was kind of the dream of both of us. And we both figured out a way well, we didn't figure out a way, but God figured out a way to make it happen. And I don't think in either one of us' wildest dreams did we ever think it was possible to be at the scale that it currently is. It's just such a gift. It's such a blessing. And totally God. I mean, if you think about it for a minute, these movies that we're telling are so specific, and they're so God-centered, and they're so, Jesus is all over them. And to have Hollywood studios to finance them, and meaning the productions and the marketing, and get behind the filmmakers in such a way that like Lionsgate gets behind myself and John and Andy, and allows us to make the films that we want to make, is just something that only God could open those doors, right? I mean, there's nothing that we can do to open those doors. And so I just feel like I'm the recipient of a true gift that God has given me in this time period as a young kid at 20. I mean, people ask me all the time, how'd you get into this? And I said, man, a lot of it started with prayer. I mean, literally the first movie I ever produced was with David White, and we started every day in prayer that God would literally give us the wisdom to be able to get through this and figure out how to produce a movie and get it made. And that's kind of been the process throughout all the films in my career. We only want to tell stories that God wants us to tell, because if they don't impact people, then in my opinion, it's too hard to make a movie. And it's like, it's a waste of time. I'm like, what's the point of that if it doesn't really do what its purpose what it can do, for people.
Yeah. Hollywood doesn't have the best reputation when it comes to Christians. I mean, what is your perception of that? I mean, you're someone who's been in and around Hollywood and production studios. What's your take on the whole how Hollywood treats Christians and the Christian audience as well?
Yeah, look, Hollywood is a business at the end of the day. I mean, there might be some studios that, will shy away from certain agenda-driven topics, but that's certainly not the case in our experience. We've done films with Sony and Lionsgate, and I've done a film with Fox as well. It's all a business. At the end of the day, it's a business. These companies need to make money. They're publicly traded companies. They got to make money. And so if you've got a product that can sell, they don't care about what your agenda is. I mean, that's been my experience. They don't care at all. They'll be like, go Jesus. I mean, they're like, great. They're not trying to get us to change to their ways or any of that stuff. I think so much of that stuff is a myth, or either it's before our time. That's possible. Like, meaning people probably experienced it. But I think since this has become such a big piece of business for Hollywood studios, our experience is they don't want to get in the way to mess anything up. And what a gift that is. Like, God has truly opened the doors to get us in that position. And I know the Kendricks are in the same thing. Like, Sony doesn't want to mess with them. Like, literally just make the movie that you guys want to make, and we will support it and get it out there. And that's been our experience as well with Lionsgate.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, this is why it's so important, though, for Christians to show up to these movies.
That's
too, right? Because showing that there's a demand for it, which I think we've seen with Jesus Revolution. There's a very big demand for it. Kevin, as we kind of round out here, I wanted to ask you, I've been asking people this question a lot. I think it's an important question about legacy. You mentioned 30 years you've been at this, right? So at the end of the day, when all is said and done, what do you want your legacy to be in this space?
Yeah, I want my legacy to be, we're kind of seeing it play out with Jesus Revolution, and you hit on a good point, which is the more people, in fact, I gave this speech in a theater in Kona, Hawaii 2 nights ago, the more people show up, audiences are helping with their $6 ticket, their $12 ticket, whatever it costs to get in a theater, to actually get this film out to other countries around the world. And so Lionsgate and our partners at Sony recently announced that Jesus Revolution, because of the success that we've seen in the United States, we're having theatrical releases in Australia, New Zealand, and Singapore, and Indonesia, and there's going to be a lot more countries that are going to be announced. But that happened because people here rallied around the film and supported it. But how exciting it is! I mean, I've been to all of those places, and I'm like, I can't even imagine the ministry that's going to happen with people in those countries. They're going to walk in and witness this film. It is going to be something that, it makes me want to actually fly to some of these places just to be a part of it, because that excites me. That's the legacy that I want to leave, is that the films I make have a lasting impact that possibly change people's lives forever.
Wow, praise God for that. And praise God that this movie is doing so well and helping towards that end. So it's fantastic stuff. And Kevin, we really appreciate you stopping by here and talking about Jesus Revolution with us here for a few minutes on Faith versus Culture.
Hey, thanks, guys. It's been a pleasure, really. Anytime.
All right, we are back here on this episode of Faith versus Culture, and Billy and I just got done speaking with one of the producers from Jesus Revolution, Kevin Downs, and that was a great conversation, really some interesting behind the scenes as well, talking about those baptisms that were happening and how Jonathan Rumi, of course, from The Chosen, was baptizing people on the set. That's really cool stuff.
It is. It's amazing to hear those stories, to get that peek behind the curtain of what went on. And the fact that, audiences are reacting to it, right? They're having this spiritual experience after seeing it. We're seeing that everywhere, as he was saying. But the fact that people on set were reacting to it as well, that's really interesting to me. Yeah. And I think it shows there's something special going on there.
Well, and I think, too, as we talked about at the top of the show with the revivals that have been popping up at Asbury and Lee and elsewhere, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's just a time where it's ripe for an awakening and people have just maybe been so grinded down by daily life, the division that's out there right now, and they're just ready for something more authentic with their faith and something to connect to help aliven that. And, reading and watching a story such as what happened back in the early 1970s with this Jesus Revolution is perhaps just one way to help that happen. And they did a good job producing the film. By all accounts, everything I'm seeing, everyone is praising this film.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a great film. And I think when you tell enough lies in culture and pretend that they're the truth, at some point there's a breaking point. Yeah. And we may be reaching some of that where people are so desperate because they've tried the lies that they start to turn toward looking for what the real truth is. And I think we might be watching some of that happen right now. Absolutely.
And we can just only hope and pray that continues and that move towards Christ only grows from here. So, all right, we're going to be back to wrap it up on the other side of the break. This is Faith versus Culture. Back in a second. All right, that is all the time we have for this episode of Faith versus Culture. As always, thank you so much for being here. We'll be praying for you throughout your week. We'll see you back here next time. God bless.